with the world from the heart, and just feeling that kind of sense of joy that Diego was talking about last week. Just the joy in the work is a matter of fact.
Yeah, I mean, my personal journey was definitely all around trauma, and I'm so blessed. I feel so blessed that trauma did happen to me, and when I say blessed, because it really sent me on this pathway where I discovered also Shiatsu. So to me, trauma was both a personal experience, and as I was going through my own healing journey and coming on the other side, I discovered a clear purpose, and that is to help others that share the same pain. And in a way, that's what brought me to Shiatsu. And when I became a therapist, to my luck again, and I guess it's one of those destinies, the patients that will come to me, even though maybe they wouldn't reveal that they're coming to me for their traumas, but trauma always came up right from the beginning. So
I think that's one of the things that we could sort of talk about here is, again, building on what Diego was saying last week, for those who saw that, the qualities that we bring as the practitioner, the groundedness, the openness, the attunement, the alignment, and the ability, the confidence to be present with trauma as it arises in the person. Our client may be, like I was, in a state of denial about the trauma. They may think they're coming for a difficult physical problem or whatever, yeah. And I find that simple sense of openness to listen to what the body mind is trying to tell you, rather than what the thinking mind is trying to tell you, allows the underlying traumas to come to the surface. Then, of course, it still has to be okayed with the left brain, the conscious mind, the managerial mind, to make it safe to work with. So you have to go in very careful little steps.
Yeah, it's you're absolutely right. I always remember something that Ohashi once said, and he said that when he comes to a treatment, he brings always two qualities, and one is of a samurai, another one is of a geisha. And I actually have a samurai in my treatment room to remind me of in a way, the quality of protection, right? And creating that kind of space in the treatment, but also the sensitivity and the delicate approach also to trauma that in a way is symbolized by the geisha. So I always remember that, bringing those two qualities into a session. In a way, when people say creating space, let's talk about creating space. How do we create space as therapists?
Well, that kind of neatly gets us onto what people might be interested in from me, which is how does clean language help us work in Shiatsu and in working particularly with trauma? And I'm not proposing to do a lot of exposition here about what clean language is or how to do it, but just of the people who are here on Zoom, can you just raise your hand if you are familiar with clean language? Adam, I know you are. If you use it in your practice, no, most people don't. Okay. So clean language essentially is called clean, which is sometimes a provocative title, because it's aiming to keep the client space clean, the space we're talking about, clean, clear of one's own presuppositions and expectations and desires to achieve results and all of that stuff. It's a very Japanese thing, I think. It's very Zen. It's like one of those Zen sand things where they do the rake through it. It's just extremely clear space. And then it's the client's own words which we work with, nothing else. We just use very simple questions to give those words back and to notice where they lead to. How, well, in my kind of work, working with the body, how can those words lead us into the body and the energetic patterns behind the problem? And it's such a simple, such a beautiful way to lead somebody into Shiatsu. That's how I use it. I use it to lead people into Shiatsu and to bring them out again, so that the thinking mind, the conscious mind, the gatekeeper mind begins to get curious. And, you know, for people who maybe with trauma or whatever aren't used to getting into their body much and don't do all the Makaho exercise and Qigong stuff that we do as Shiatsu practitioners, for those kind of people, it's a gentle introduction, a bit of a challenge too, and it's not for everyone. But that's one of the first things that clean language does. It respects a person's boundaries profoundly. And in trauma, of course, our boundaries can be completely messed up. They can disappear, they can be very fragile. And just to be able to lie down on the mat or on the table with somebody who is there holding their own boundaries clear, but at the same time saying, I completely respect your boundaries. That works, you know, before you said anything, that's working at a very profound energetic level. And all sorts of things can happen when you do that. Because one of the features of trauma, of course, is that a traumatized person, especially people who have early attachment trauma, which goes right back to when they were tiny. One of the features of trauma is to try to make the other person feel the same sense of trauma that you feel. So, you know, when somebody lies down and I feel something coming at me in their energy field, it's like, okay, I'm listening, I respect that. Sometimes it can be almost like a tsunami coming at you. You let it go by and you just stay with it. You do your grounding and you wait for what happens next. And then the energy system says, oh, you're reacting differently from most people, and so on. So that's the whole thing about boundaries and space. I think that clean language absolutely helps us to confirm a person's boundaries and keep their space clear.
Beautiful. Yeah. One of the first exercises that I always do with patients is a boundary exercise. So it in a way that becomes quite tangible for them too, so they can sense their boundary and feel their boundary. And it's so helpful. It's a big aha moment for people, and it's a very direct way of working with boundary. But it sounds like yours is quite a bit subtle. So I'll be curious to see that or experience that at some point.
Well, you're talking about the samurai and the geisha. That just comes from my sense of, my interpretation of the Japanese way of doing these things. You've got to sit there with no mind, no intention, non-doing, and the less you do, the more happens. You know, it's simple as that.
What kind of patients do you tend to work with? I mean, there's all kinds of traumas, as you know.
Yes, I wanted to say that too, because you know, our classic concept of trauma is somebody who's been through a terrible, in-your-face life event, and but I think what's evolving now, both in the psychotherapy side of things and also in our kind of work, is a realization that trauma is much more complex than that. And what I'm more interested in is the kind of trauma that doesn't want to come out, the kind of trauma that needs to know that somebody who is sitting there has the skills, has the heart, has the confidence to welcome it into the room. And you know, I'm not like Diego. I don't specialize in working on seriously traumatized people all the time. I don't think I could do it. I'm a fragile creature, but but I'm, I love the work that Diego does, and he was a student at our college in London, and it was just great to see him going on to find his own teachers and do his own thing and do stuff like that.
I
But
think I think you're a little too humble. I don't think you were that fragile. You know, your
I'm
strength.
trying to be more robust
You know,
as time
your
goes by.
strength is in the yin. You know, and Diego could be, you know, the opposite, right? The more yang
No,
approach.
that's true. That's true. If you find your strength, I mean, this is absolutely true in your Shiatsu training and the so-called journey that we take in Shiatsu. It's so difficult to find your strength, I think. And because often, this is a cliche, but it involves being willing to confront and befriend your weakness.
Mm,
Your strengths are there in your weaknesses or hiding behind them.
beautifully
And
said.
it took me years to even begin to think that that was an okay thing to do.
You know, one of the most shocking things that I found in my research around trauma and just being exposed to it and working with it is some of the tremendous stats that I came across from psychiatrists in the United States. And to make a long story short, in a nutshell, what they discovered over time, that underneath all the major diseases, including chronic pain, autoimmune diseases, digestive problems, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, there was always a component of trauma there.
Mm, absolutely. And, the first, probably a largest percentage of the patients in those kind of studies, they want a medical diagnosis. They want some pharmaceutical help, and they're not too keen on going anywhere near the stuff you just mentioned.
Mhm.
Which is again why I say that that's what really interests me, is it helping people to get closer to the traumas that might be underlying that undermining the strength of the immune system. And there are good reasons in Chinese medicine why the immune system, connecting with our sense of who we are, and our sense of who we are being completely disturbed by a traumatic experience, it kind of works in a pretty clear circle there. Why does trauma affect the immune system like that?
Yes, yes, and to me, the immune system always symbolizes boundaries.
Boundaries, yeah, yeah. I think of the immune system with two elements. The metal element is like the Great Wall of China, the stones,
Mhm.
the boundary, and then the soldiers on top are like the triple heater, uh, the the that energy that you also need on the wall to
Mhm.
keep the enemy out.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
beautifully, and a lot of people also walking around not aware that they've experienced the symptoms of trauma really as again, part of it is lack of awareness around it, maybe even lack of training around it with with medical doctors, which is the first go-to for many patients. So there's many people, millions of people walking around. I call it the walking wounded syndrome. They're just walking around with symptoms that are unresolved and they're ongoing,
Yeah.
and also frequently a lot of the traumas are what we call secondary traumas, right? Where they've been not necessarily a traumatic event has happened to them, but they witnessed or they've been exposed to it. Or can you comment a little bit around?
Or like David Treleaven, the pioneer of trauma informed mindfulness work. His story, he is a psychotherapist who was specializing in working with trauma, and one day at a mindfulness retreat he suddenly started getting really terrible kind of images and symptoms going on mentally, and he had no idea where was all this trauma coming from. And interestingly, the mindfulness teacher said, just stick with the mindfulness practice and everything will be okay. But when he got home, it wasn't okay, and his family could see that he wasn't okay. And essentially, he realized that he had, from working with all of these traumatized patients, he had acquired secondary trauma. And that's what got him interested in this thing of taking a trauma-informed approach to mindfulness work. And we need to do that too, of course, in Shiatsu.
Yes.
But there are so many ways and modalities, great teachers talking about how to work with trauma. So I'm not here to sort of talk about that so much, just about how can clean language help us use any of those great modalities. And I think one other key thing is that it sort of changes the balance between the expert practitioner and the patient. It requires a more sorts of collaborative approach.
Beautiful.
The patient is asked, I would say to people if they come for the first session, please make this your space. I'm here to help you have a dialogue between your mind and your body. I'm not here to have a psychotherapeutic conversation with you. And then we do a little kind of mindfulness settling in kind of thing, so that a person begins to feel, yes, this is my space. And whoever this guy is, he is allowing me to have my space. And then we can begin. So that's really important. And that gives that sense of control. The second thing I always say is, if anything doesn't feel right, or if I ask a question that doesn't work, then just say so. Don't bother to answer it. You're as much in control of this as I am. So that giving some control to the client is one of the fundamental principles of working with trauma, and it goes all the way back to the pioneers of psychological trauma work like Babette Rothschild, Pat Ogden. Giving control, putting the brakes on, knowing so the client knows when they can say, hold up, that's enough. And gradually, step by step, you sensitize yourself to that.
Beautiful. Maybe could you take us through that experience as you would take that client? Do you think you can do something like that for us?
Oh, okay.
That mindfulness type of experience, where you set the tone.
Well, I was thinking of something that's slightly different for us here, because we're practitioners. Sure. But this is so those of us who are here on Zoom, I don't know, Joanne and Carolina, if you want to put your cameras on.
Come back on camera here, yeah.
Yeah, but for those of us who are here on Zoom, and we have Adam Hellinger here, who's a master Qigong practitioner, so this should make sense if you put some of your energy in, Adam. Yes, this was something suggested by a colleague of mine who is in the mindfulness teachers group that I run here in London. She's a clinical psychologist and a research neuroscientist, and also bridging the gap, she's a martial arts expert and a meditation teacher. And so there's Tamara Russell, Dr. Tamara Russell, and she has a lot of experience working with psychosis, and done a lot of work online for years before all this stuff happened. And one of the things she suggests is just a kind of tuning in that we can all do. So I'll just talk you through it, and just maybe for 5 minutes. So if you just bring your hands up so that they can be seen by the rest of us, okay? And then, of course, as if you're in a Qigong posture or Tai Chi posture, if you're in any doubt, look at Adam's fingers, because he knows how to do it. And then you can close your eyes or have them half closed or whatever. You don't need to look at the screen. That's really important, to let go of the screen for the moment. And just come to your sitting bones, come to the soles of your feet, come to whatever gives you a sense of being grounded, bringing you away from this very audio-visual experience of connecting online, just coming back to any part of your body that sort of seems to be the right place to allow you to remember the ground underneath you, the planet Earth. And just taking a moment to get a sense of that. And then as you develop that sense of connection to the Earth, however you like to do that, maybe imagining going deeper down or having roots, whatever it is that works for you, being aware at the same time of your breathing and allowing your hands, again, keeping your eyes closed or half closed, just allowing your hands to come very gently up as you breathe in and sort of floating gently down as you breathe out. And just repeating that a few times in your own rhythm. Gently up as you breathe in, gently down as you breathe out. A couple more times. Just really getting used to it, getting acquainted with how you are breathing at this particular moment in time, on this particular day, on planet Earth. How is your breathing? And then when you're ready, if it's okay, just to softly open your eyes, not looking at the other people as faces, but just getting a sense of the rhythm of the movement of all of our hands, noticing how different they are. So with our hands, we're kind of advertising the rhythm of our breath. And then maybe you notice one other person particularly who sort of seems to have a rhythm a bit like yours. Just allowing yourself to tune into that rhythm, not copying it, but just kind of as if you're beginning a dance of this breath, this rhythm of the breath, with one other person, two other people. But at the same time, respecting your own rhythm of breath. So we gently allow ourselves to kind of tune into each other. We're not trying to be in rhythm as such, just noticing each other's rhythms. And being amazed by that difference. It's not like we're trying to all breathe as one. It's like we're just here to respect our own breathing and to be curious and interested in the rhythms and movements of the others. And then allowing your hands to gently come down and sit on your lap or your legs, whatever. And just take a moment, eyes softly open, just to acknowledge you're here and the others are here and we're here as a group. And then coming back. I don't know if anyone wants to unmute and say what your experience was of that. How do you feel now in relation to this meeting compared to how you felt before? It's always a bit of a challenge to get people feeling engaged in a Zoom meeting rather than just like watching. But how did that work? Does anybody have a comment? Adam, anything you could say? If you unmute yourself.
Unmute yourself, Adam. And there we go. Hi.
Hello.
Very interesting that you can become aware of each other, but not necessarily have to perfectly synchronize your breath with them. It's like just looking or just sensing what the person's doing enables a connection with them, especially, and with a group. I couldn't say what it was, but there was a feeling of us all being together, and that was, as you say, it's unusual for a Zoom meeting for people to join. in more than there was a collective awareness. It sounds a bit posh, but do you think? I think we're heading in towards that direction.
Absolutely. That's what it's designed for. It's to build this sense of the power of the group. And I want to go on later on in this meeting to talk about the healing power of the group, which is so important, I think, in our work. Any other quick comment? How you feel now compared to how you felt before? Did it make no difference at all? Joanne, do you want to unmute yourself and give us a quick word?
Yeah, same as, very, very connected, very connected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can't be the same as it was before, because we were all acknowledging everybody else rather than just, oh, I'll just go up and get it. I'm still listening, and I'd put my video off, and I'd gone and got a drink of water, still listening, but very much physically disconnected. So that really was great.
Yeah.
Just put your video back on and join the group again. It was like, okay, look, even my dog has now come to join. So thank you.
That physically disconnected is what we allow ourselves to do in online meetings a lot, I think. And it only really starts to work when you feel physically connected online. And we certainly know that's easy enough,
I have to say I've done that quite a bit I've done a lot of 5 rhythms dance and even tango. And so we have a practice in that where you are most definitely yourself dancing, but you really watch your partner and you move with your partner. But I've never thought of really doing that in Shiatsu. It's great. Thank you.
I think it's an important kind of metaphor really for how I think about working with a client, because as you say with tango, they have management leadership trainings where you do tango, because the whole thing about tango is leading and following, but without losing your own authority in the dance. So we want to keep our authority, but at the same time, we want to be really sensitive to what the other person's doing. And that's a pretty good metaphor for what we do in Shiatsu and Seiki, I think. Dawn, unmute yourself.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. I just felt so present and heart, it's just really heart-centered. Something was coming from the heart and spacious as well, and respectful of others.
Yes, and as you say that, Dawn, I'm beginning to feel a shift in myself from the sort of we're starting a Zoom meeting into actually feeling gratitude to be here and enjoying it. So let's see where that takes us. How about you, Mikhail?
Well, sorry, it reminds me of the exercise that I experienced with you in the class in the Congress.
In Vienna, yeah.
It was slightly different where you had us sitting in groups, I think it was groups of 3s or 4s, and we were sitting not facing each other, but almost in a triangle, in a triad, and we did a similar exercise. But I remember it so clearly as if it was yesterday. And as in a way the noise faded, the mental noise and the noise of being in the Congress. What eventually all of us felt is in a way the essence of each other. And there was something very spiritual around that. For me personally, anyways, that's what I took. It's almost the sensing, feeling, experiencing the spirit of the other. And it was really sacred experience. It was quite vivid.
Well, thank you, Michael. Well, I think that's what we're all aiming at in Shiatsu, is to get to the essence of the client in one way or another. In this case, I just come back to the thing about non-doing. The more I'm doing, the less I'm going to be getting to the essence of the client. Which again is, why I think clean language is such a helpful tool, because it keeps my efforts to do stuff out of the space. And there's a kind of weird chemistry. The more the client's energetic system, that deep intelligence that's way beyond anything the brain can think about, begins to sense that this is a different kind of space that they're in, the more the things that are in the way of that essence begin to emerge and be willing to play. That's the thing, I guess.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a beautiful approach. And
Adam just raised the hand.
Yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
The thought that just came to my mind is that one of the differences was I was trying to be aware of how they were breathing, but I wasn't trying to change their breath. And that's what made the connection different. And I think, taking it back to your work, Nick, is you can do the same using words. So you can do it on a level much more conscious than subconscious, because our language, we can connect to the subconscious and bring it up into verbalization. So if you ask a question which doesn't tell someone to do something but enables the person to realize you're with them, you get a similar connection.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me on to
that was well organized, wasn't it?
Yes. One other way that that clean language can help, and this is really quite unique to clean language. Well, not unique to clean language, but clean language is a great way to bring it in, because we don't have any training in our Shiatsu training to actually bring in the metaphors that arise, the metaphors that a client uses to describe either their pain or their sense of something shifting, some of that stuff that's in the way of their essence emerging into life. Those metaphors, if you take them seriously, are so powerful as a way of helping the person to move on. And that's the man who invented clean language, David Grove, New Zealand therapist, originally began because he was working with people, traumatized clients, Vietnam veterans, people suffering from childhood sexual abuse and so on. And he just realized that, like a lot of other therapies have realized, it isn't helpful to go into the trauma and get people to talk about it. It's just re-traumatizing. But the metaphors that people would use, if he took them seriously, if he took them literally, and just asked these very, very simple questions, not imposing his idea of what does that metaphor mean, but allowing them to explore the deeper underlying sense of what is there in that metaphor. That's how he began to try to find the questions that would be absolutely minimum interference, but at the same time encourage further development of what's going on there. I've got an example, if I may give you one. This is a wonderful book, just came out last year, The Tao of Trauma. You know it, I'm sure you know it, Mikhail.
Yeah, I have that book.
Great. And I thought it would be good just to kick off with a quote from here. She's talking about a young man who was in the military, and both his parents were in the military, and so he just kind of went into the military as a thing you do, I guess. She says, being overseas in a combat zone had been terrifying for him. He had attempted suicide once. He was chronically anxious and highly vigilant, absolutely normal signs of
Nick, you just froze on us. Are you there? Hmm. Nick, are you there? Well, we'll wait for Nick to come back. Did any of you have questions so far or anything to add? No. Okay. Well, he just disconnected and he should be back with us soon. All of you from England or from Britain? No? Ireland? Yes. Joanna's from Ireland. Sheila, where are you from? Can't hear.
Ireland.
Ireland also, okay. Adam?
I'm from just outside of London, west of London. But yeah. Oh, look, looks like Nick's returning.
Where
There
is
he is. Success.
There you are. Just unmute yourself, Nick. There you
What
go.
happened to, okay. I was.
Oh, you were just about to read that quote from the book, and
Yeah.
it froze there.
Okay, I froze. Okay.
Okay.
No wonder. It's a scary bit. Okay. Is my mic okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, she says over the next several months I used, she has this kidney holding thing. She just puts her hand under the kidneys, you know, in the back. Very, very, very simple, non-doing kind of holding. I use the kidney adrenal hold alongside acupuncture treatments. And here comes the metaphor. In one memorable session, as I held the kidneys, he told me, I feel like water droplets coming together instead of being separate and apart. I'm finding myself like my whole entity is working as one instead of being so scattered inside. That water droplets coming together is such a beautiful kidney appropriate metaphor. I'm sure he hadn't studied Chinese medicine, but this is one of the things we notice. Some, you know, that the metaphors our clients use do sometimes really resonate with the five elements and so on. That's a lovely example, I think, of how to listen to your clients' metaphors and take them seriously. And I'm sure you have similar examples, Mikhail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
People are having gut-wrenching experiences. Oh, that experience was so gut-wrenching, or I felt like I was stabbed in the back, or I froze when this happened, when this accident happened, I just froze.
And when people use those kind of metaphors, you know, I felt like a stab in the back. It's, you know, it's a common metaphor. They think they're just saying a common metaphor.
That's
but
right.
if you then bring in a clean question like, and where exactly is that stab in the back? Wow. Then they first of all, they don't know what you're talking about. Then they think for a moment if they're willing to play the game. And then, I don't know. Usually the first thing people say is, I don't know. Because that's the left brain talking, because it doesn't know. And then they say, well, actually, there's a funny feeling, you know, right here behind my shoulder blade. So as soon as you start taking the metaphor seriously, the body mind says, hey, someone's actually listening here. And the dialogue begins not just between you and the client, but between the client's mind and their body. And the key begins to move. So that in a sense, the Shiatsu has begun before you've put a hand on the person. So by golly, I'm seeing how the time is going by. I would like, if I may, to give you a case study about another aspect of metaphor, which as you get into it, as you take the metaphor seriously and you ask the clean questions, the metaphor evolves. it changes. And here, the example I've got here is of a physical trauma. Someone I was working with, and she stopped me anytime you want to ask a question. But basically her back had gone agonizingly. She was just trying to make a bed at home. Suddenly, boom, you know, that agonizing back pain. It was so bad, she had to go to hospital. And after the test, they said that she had degenerative bones in her lower spine. So they're kind of, yes, there is a physical problem here. And when she came to see me, she was having acupuncture, physiotherapy, and Pilates, and she was doing her own yoga every day. So, you know, pretty aware and embodied person. But so I asked her how is it now? She said about 3 out of 10 low level ache, no acute spasms anymore. But standing up is the worst thing. So after we talked a bit, I asked her one of the classic clean language questions, which is not for me not to assume that I know anything about what she wants. Is you just ask them, what would you like to have happen in relation to all of this? And she says, to get back to being able to do aerobic exercise without fear for my back. Okay, so if anybody has read my book, there's a chapter on asking the outcome question. That's an interesting statement. She has a positive statement there. I want to get back to doing aerobic exercise. And there's also a negative, without fear. So it's not like a complete 100% positive statement. It's, I want to be able to do the stuff I used to do without fear for my back. And then she adds that I want to start Qigong classes actually as well for my lower back. And in hindsight, I was reading this through this morning. I thought that's a kind of an interesting triangle. Aerobics is really hard stuff, young stuff. Fear comes with that. And then she puts in this third bit of the triangle, Qigong, which is a much more body-friendly approach. It's almost as if she has a intuition that the Qigong is going to be there helping to balance out this fear and the aerobics. But anyway, so coming on to the metaphors, as she lies down and we talk a bit, I ask her a few clean questions, I begin to get the sense that there's something coming up about time, about impatience. She wants this to be sorted, which is, you know, pretty much how we all feel when we've had a chronic thing for some time. So I came up with this question. It's not exactly a clean question, but I said it like this: thinking about a timeline for this healing process from all the way back before the problem began, which is an interesting thing to say because it takes you back to a safe place, from all the way back before the problem began to how it is now, and thinking further into the future. How long do you see it taking for your back to be good enough to do aerobic exercise without fear? So that's the clean bit. I'm bringing her words back in, the thing she wants. That's, you know, keeping her motivated to answer this question because that's what she wants to do aerobic exercise without fear. And at the same time, I'm giving her this huge arc of time, all the way back before, how it is now, how long into the future. And she said, there was a little smile, and she said, she obviously was realizing, she said, it'll probably be a more gradual process than I'd like. So it's like the body is beginning to talk, she says. And she actually says, I feel my muscles are saying, don't push it too quickly. And that's really interesting when the body mind isn't talking just in terms of feelings, it's actually verbalizing. It's like she's able to translate into English the sensations that her muscles are giving her. So then I asked, well, is there anything else about that, your muscles saying don't push it too quickly? And there was a long pause. She was just sort of listening to what her body was saying. And here comes the metaphor. She says, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I need a program that combines all of the pieces, the Qigong, the yoga, the physio, the acupuncture. I need to think of it all as parts of one program. So it becomes a round jigsaw that all the pieces fit into. So notice, first of all, she says it's like a jigsaw puzzle. then as she thinks about all these elements that she wants to fit into it, all these healing therapies and so on, the jigsaw puzzle gets a shape. It becomes round. We don't know why. Round jigsaw puzzles aren't that common, but something's coming through. And if you develop this love of listening to metaphors, you know this is going to go somewhere. So what happens next? I said, well, is there anything else about that round jigsaw? And again, her body is the thing that answers. She says, yeah, my body says, yes, that's what we need. And she says, I have the image of a whole circle. I feel the muscles relaxing as sorry, something just come up on my screen. I feel the muscles relaxing as I see this whole circle, round and complete. So it's kind of losing its jigsawness, and it's just becoming something round and complete. And at the same time, she felt her shoulder and neck muscles relaxing a bit, which is like the body saying, yeah, you've got the right metaphor here. So then I did the Shiatsu Seiki treatments, mixing some Seiki and Shiatsu. And at the end, what she said first was, my muscles feel more relaxed and released than they have for a very long time. Now, people often say that after a Shiatsu treatment, of course, it's not a strange thing. But it seemed relevant because she'd been doing all of these other therapies, that actually this process that we just done was making a deeper difference. So that was a good sign. And then, so I asked her the lovely closing question we have in Clean Language is, what do you know now about all of that? Everything that's happened, the mind-body work, the Shiatsu work, the Clean Language work. What do you know now about all of that? And she said, the image of the sphere came right back to her straight away. It's round, it's solid, there's no jagged edges. I think of it in my abdomen, solidly there, so all the other muscles can relax. A very soft white sphere that's just there, and it's strong without being tense. So it's like the visual metaphor from earlier has evolved into an energetic presence in her abdomen, influencing the muscles. And sitting up afterwards, she said that now it felt that the muscles, it now felt that for the muscles, it was okay for the constant ache to be there without having to fear that there would be another spasm. So a little step, you could say, in releasing the sense of trauma, the fear. Yes, there's a muscle ache, there's an ache, and the muscles are aware of that, but there's no longer this fear that, there's going to be another spasm. That thing about, as with the veteran from the previous case, that anxiety about what's going to happen in the future diminishes, and you can just be more mindfully present with what's actually happening in your body. So that's a case. Beautiful. Of how metaphors, if you listen to them, can really help a person to develop more there. Any responses? Any thoughts, comments, disagreements, questions about how to listen to metaphors? The key step in listening to metaphors is just to take it seriously. However stupid it sounds, however weird. And often a client, when they start to say it, will say, this is going to sound weird, but, and then something good is on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, a gold nugget, a little crumb. Yeah, go ahead, Adam. Did you have a question?
No, he's just brushing his head. He's using a self-compassion movement. This is really popular in self-compassion mindfulness, just gently bringing your hand across your forehead, doing, brushing down the triple heater. It's very powerful stuff just to get clients to do that to themselves. But can I hear a little bit, Mikhail, about how your work with groups is going? Because I think that's so important in working with trauma, is not just having a practitioner-client relationship, but getting some kind of group energy involved.
Yeah, obviously.
That's yeah.
Obviously, with the pandemic, there hasn't been much group work, but I have done some virtual groups recently. But it started after being an owner and a lead therapist in my clinic, having a team around me, and creating a center that specifically worked with the effects of trauma, which was unheard of. It still is kind of unheard of in this part of the world. And seeing, many patients over the years, and even though it was great working as a team with trauma and having this different modalities come together with the complexity of trauma, and because trauma infiltrates every aspect of our body, mind, and lives, right? So when I decided, there was a missing link of not having that group experience, right? And I decided last year around January that I'm going to create something for groups of 10 to 15, and I thought of putting certain tools that I've taught separately in the past, and I thought of putting them together, and specifically again working with trauma, and I didn't know exactly how the response would be, if it would be effective. Should I bring another therapist into the group, or should I do it myself? And I decided to go ahead and do it myself with the group. And the experience was actually quite profound. And as you set in a way the space and the rules to create that safe space for people's traumas to be moved, and holding that kind of space for a group has been such an amazing and fulfilling experience. And people in general, and I've taken numerous groups over this past year, people in general feel the first thing that they comment is, oftentimes happens in every group, oh my God, I thought my story, my pain was only mine, but after hearing this woman or this man, I felt so relieved. And that's when we work in groups with trauma, the relief comes in understanding that our trauma, our pain is not just ours, and it's not unique to us. There's someone else either in the same shoes, or maybe just a few steps ahead of me, or a few steps behind me on the same path, and having that recognition, and that creates by itself so much healing, because the trauma is very isolating.
Absolutely, yes.
It's very isolating, and having that recognition in the group is tremendous. And you see, as the group as the sessions progress, the connection and the relationships that they develop with each other also is so powerful. And because the work is so body centered, and it allows, even in a group environment, it allows that personal experience too, working with the body.
Yeah.
And after time, I just step out of the way. I mean, I teach the method or the technique, and then I step away, and I allow that personal, again, exploration and experience. And I step in when they need assistance, or when they're stuck, or when they're confused, and then I step back away, and allow that, again, that self-exploration, that and that those moments will happen where suddenly they remember things that they completely forgotten. So traumatic memories all of a sudden will come up, and they had no idea, or it was completely out of memory. and the release of pain. I mean, it's very powerful work in the group and trauma, and again, teaching them how to come back to this wholeness, this body, right? How to unify themselves. It's incredible.
I think that bringing the body in is the key factor. I mean, I've been to plenty of groups where there's been a lot of talk about things, but I haven't really felt that much connection or sense that I felt safe to, you know, move on in terms of my own stuff, because it was just talking. And as soon as you bring in practices that allow the body to come into the presence of the group, that changes everything in the group, as we sort of experienced at the beginning with that little thing. And of course, there's a huge movement now towards the whole thing about embodiment, and trauma work, as we know, is leaping ahead because we're allowed now to acknowledge that the body is involved in storing these traumatic things. So,
absolutely.
How much more time do we have, Mikhail? I was just wondering.
We can go another 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. I mean, I had a couple more points to make, but
sure,
really more moving on into that thing about the group and the point about all the different kinds of trauma there are. So as I said earlier on, you know, the classic idea of a trauma as being one awful incident. Actually, there are so many kinds of trauma, and we can be affected by them all. And trauma, like laughter, is infectious. There's a trauma is the water element, laughter is the fire element, and they are both elements which are so volatile, so capable of transmitting stuff to others. And this growing awareness now in the work of various people about collective trauma. And Thomas Hübl, the very impressive German leader in that field, has done a lot of work with collective trauma, is very clear about this, that you can only heal collective trauma collectively. And that seems to be where we're all going now in the world at the moment. This collective trauma we're all in now is amazing. We've never had a global collective trauma like this one. And I just wanted to give a couple of examples about, you know, what's that all about. And the first one comes from the work of an American woman, maybe you've heard of her, Shelley Tygielski. She's an ex-corporate exec who trained herself in mindfulness and is now one of the top mindfulness teachers. And she does a lot of work with survivors of mass shootings. She was invited by the survivors of the Parkland, Florida mass shooting to organize a mindfulness retreat for them. And the history of that was that, first of all, after the shooting, the students were full of that traumatized energy. It's like, you know, as Peter Levine says, the trauma response, first you're full of adrenaline, the fight or flight adrenaline floods the body. And at the same time, there's the freeze or faint response, the immobilization response, the play dead response, because you can't do anything, you're powerless. And these two things are like putting the brake and the accelerator on at the same time, and that gets stuck in the body, all that energy. So they were looking for a way to release all that energy, and they threw themselves into organizing a big march on Washington, you know, for gun control and so on. And that took a lot of their energy for a long time. And then everything sort of fizzled out, and they began to realize that they hadn't paid any attention to their own post-traumatic stress. They've just been trying to kind of do what a lot of traumatized people do, which is keep doing stuff. So you don't have to notice what's underneath. So then they asked her to organize this mindfulness retreat, and it, you know, it worked. One participant said, that was the first time in 6 months that I felt a moment's peace. And he said, how could I get more of that? And so how can they get more of that? And what they did is this thing about groups. They started to build a buddy network to create a community of self-care for themselves using mindfulness techniques. And then they started reaching out to the survivors of other mass shootings in Las Vegas and Pittsburgh Synagogue, and Columbine, and so on. So again, creating a wider network of community. And just to remind ourselves that this isn't easy work at all. It was, as that all was going on the first anniversary, shortly after the first anniversary of the shootings, 2 of the survivors committed suicide, which is another thing which can often happen in trauma. But there's a beautiful thing that Shelley Tugielski said, and about this kind of patient, mindful work around trauma. She said, you know, we're not here to solve these problems immediately. What we're here to do is to nurture, to plant seeds, and these trees will bear some beautiful fruits to gradually transform the way we think about these things in our society. I think that's such wise words, because whenever you try to have a confrontation with the, you know, enormously powerful interests which don't want to do anything about these problems, it just results in a confrontation. But if you think you're planting seeds and there will be some beautiful fruits one day on those trees as this generation grow up to think differently, then yes, that seems to me a good way to think. And there's one more bit I wanted to give you, which is from the work of another colleague of mine, Mark Leonard here, who's a leader in the field of bringing a socially aware, socially connected mindfulness. So his aim when he works with mindfulness, say in an organization, is not to just help everybody cope more with stress. It's to make that whole organization more alive and human and interconnected at the human level. And in a video he just released, he quotes author Andrew Solomon, who was visiting Rwanda after the genocide. Mm. And one of the Rwandan workers there said that they had a lot of trouble. We had a lot of trouble, he said, with the Western mental health workers who came here immediately after the genocide. We actually had to ask someone to leave. Mm. And that's, of course, going into traumatic situations straight afterwards and trying to do counseling is actually not a good idea anyway. The last thing people want to do is to talk about their problem. So Andrew Solomon asked him, well, what was the problem? And he said they came and their practice did not involve being outside in the sun where you begin to feel better. There was no musical drumming. Psychotherapy, well, sure, I know, okay, there wasn't any musical drumming, but I was asking you some important questions. There was no musical drumming to get your blood flowing again. There was no sense that the entire community had taken a day off so that the entire community could lift you up and bring you back to joy. There was no acknowledgement of the stress and depression as something external that could actually be cast out again. These therapists were thinking, oh, this stress and depression is your deepest stuff, I'm going to work with it. And he said, then he paused meaningfully and said, instead, they would take people one at a time, not a group, but one at a time, into these dingy little rooms and have them sit around for an hour and talk about the bad things that had happened. We had to ask them to leave. I just think that's such a beautiful invocation of the kind of embodied practices that we can, add to in Shiatsu. There's rhythm, there's movement, there's touch, and also this sense of the group. This is something that I'm just getting more and more interested in, is how can we access the power of the group to do those healing things.
Yeah, it's that's where I'm heading to. There's so much power in the group, and from my teachings and learnings over the year in the research, post-traumatic stress disorder is quite high in societies that are very insular.
Yeah, yeah.
And in societies like Rwanda, in Africa, in the Middle East, their rates of PTSD is not as high as in a country like Canada, which has astounded me when I found the studies. And the reason being is partly what you just mentioned. When a trauma does happen, you have people, even if you don't want them, you have people coming to be around you,
Yeah,
and to feed you, to make you laugh, to comfort you. As in a country like Canada, when a traumatic event does happen, there's a lack of that.
Yes, and in a lot of traditional African cultures, there is that sense that when somebody is ill, it is the community that is troubled, is suffering, not just the individual. Here in our culture, we try to take those individuals and put them away somewhere safe and carry on without noticing, why did that person get that ill? What is it that's happening in the society that caused that? And so this kind of socially engaged mindfulness, of which Shiatsu I think of is a very important part, embodied work. We can really make a difference there, I think.
Beautiful. One is, I know that you have an online course coming up. Can you let us know?
Thank you for mentioning that. There is room, as they used to say on London buses, room for one more inside. It's starting on Wednesday. It's for people who've got a little bit of experience already working with clean language. And I've got one more place, if anybody would be interested in joining that. It's going to be absolutely great, I can tell you, because I did one last month and we all really got an awful lot out of it, including me. So yes, that would be great if someone would like to join that.
Beautiful.
Thank you for reminding me.
Can you post a link in the event, in the group here? Yeah.
It's somewhere in the Facebook stream of stuff and posts I've done, but I'll put the link again.
Is it for the whole day, Nick, or just part?
No. I think that bite-sized Zoom sessions are much better. So it's 2 hours for once a week for 4 weeks. So it's 4 weeks only. It's a bite-sized thing. It's only 2 hours a week. And then you have some home practice on Zoom with colleagues on the course. So you can try out your clean questions, make mistakes, learn together, and it's fun. And I think that's an important point as well. I really have to keep emphasizing clean language is not for all your clients. Some of them just don't want to go there. That's absolutely fine. But when people get the idea and they start to play the game of this clean questions thing, not only do some clients just take it away and use it themselves, you can ask yourself clean questions and it can be very powerful. But when they come back, as I try to do, for example, when I go to see my acupuncturist, I ask myself beforehand, what would I like to have happen? And by the time I've got there, a lot of chi has already started to move. And I've already got metaphors in my mind about what I'd like to have happen and so on.
Beautiful.
So, it's a very good process.
Well, thank you, Nick, and thank everyone for joining us.
Indeed. Thank you, folks.
It's precious work.
And yes, and Michael, I really look forward to hearing more about how your group approach to trauma is going, because if you look at Michael's website and you see the list of all the different modalities that you bring to that work, I think it's really inspiring, because I think that's so much of what we need to do these days, is not to stay in our own little silos and cubicles of which therapy we practice, but begin to get curious about, hey, what are the common factors here? What are the things that all of these different therapies are doing? But I'm going on too long.
Well,
that's
Thank
enough
you.
for me.
Thank you,
But
Nick.
thanks.
Very gracious. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michal.
Have a great day, everyone.
See you later.
See ya.